Welcome to the next great session, end-to-end service automation, capitalizing on business disruption opportunities. And I'm excited to be joined here today by Susan White, Head of Strategy and Marketing for Netcracker, Michael Kearns, Co-founder and Chief Strategy Officer of Amartis, and Jason Ettinger, Senior Product Manager for Neostar. So welcome, Susan, Michael, and Jason. Tell you what, please help our viewers by each starting out with a brief word about yourself and then the perspectives that you bring to our topic before we move into questions. Let's go in the order of Susan, Michael, then Jason.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Sue White from Netcracker, responsible for strategy and marketing. Bringing new levels of automation to the telco networks is basically a core strategy in Netcracker, and we've been enhancing and adding new functions to our BSS OSS portfolio to really help operators automate across and within different networks. So I want to bring various experiences. We're going to be talking about some specific cases we have as service providers are starting to automate very specific parts of their networks, like Open vRAN, for example, and slicing. And one thing for sure that we'll be doing throughout this session is referencing very heavily on the MEF-LSO framework, really key framework that is going to be important for all of us to adhere to. Whether it's southbound with Presto, whether it's northbound up to the BSS or across service provider networks. And not just to make multi-vendor easier, but certainly to work across different service provider networks, which will be a core part of our discussion today.
Hello, everybody. Michael Kearns is my name. I'm a co-founder of Amartis. Amartis is a company that specializes in automation and orchestration. We work with a global customer base of providers and vendors. We provide orchestration and automation across network and cloud. We work very closely with our customers in the industry bodies like the Metro Ethernet Forum, or the MEF and the TEAM Forum, and also more recently in the C-band. We have a lot of experience that we can bring, and I'll talk specifically about our initiatives around inter-provider automation and the LSO Sonata standard, and how we're enabling providers to negotiate services in real time with true plug-and-play standards.
Hi, I'm Jason Ettinger, Senior Product Manager for Carrier Provisioning Solutions at Neostar. We simplify the purchase and sale of wholesale access and transport services between service providers with a cloud-based platform. We do this by simplifying and automating workflow. My work at Neostar is aligned to the LSO framework's Sonata reference point, with a focus on transforming the business and operational processes between service providers. Our solution automates the wholesale network connectivity services are bought, sold, and fulfilled by instantly connecting buyers to the right suppliers and streamlining the order management process.
Excellent. Michael, enlighten me by sharing what you feel is driving the current wave of business disruption and how big is the potential impact?
Okay, so sure, delighted to share that with you. We're really seeing a perfect storm in terms of kind of the disruption to the industry, in terms of how the demands that enterprise and businesses have for access to services on a global basis. They need instant access, on-demand access. The expectation is much higher in the current environment. Coupled with that, we're seeing the emergence of the standards which allow providers to interoperate. We're seeing also an emergence of new technologies which overcome barriers that have persisted for many, many decades. You know, particularly in the customer edge and the access of the network, where we're seeing things like 5G and satellite, which are removing or providing alternatives to the fixed network access that traditionally was provided by traditional telco providers. We're seeing edge computing, which brings the computing ability closer to the enterprise itself, to the customers, and really makes that a more seamless experience and on-demand experience for customers. So the disruption that's taking place is really driving a new supply chain of providers, which includes the hyperscaler cloud providers, but also opens up new space for new entrants to actually enter the market, and allows for for those new entrants to capture some new market share. So there's really great and exciting opportunities for providers. There's also threats for existing providers who fail to automate and introduce the standards, who fail to capture the opportunity. And it's really about collaboration between those providers, and no single provider can provide everything that an individual enterprise needs. So they must have seamless ways to collaborate.
Yes. Tell you what, Michael, let's continue on that. How can service automation and standards be applied to address enterprise demand for universal access to on-demand ICT services?
So if you look at that idea that no single service provider can provide everything that an enterprise needs, be it, enterprise will like to choose things like best in breed security. They'll need to provide access into regions that they don't have a network in, they don't have network connectivity in. There's cloud, a big demand for using public cloud services, for using private cloud, for using lots of different types of applications that can be provided on demand. Well, to coordinate all of this, you need to be able to coordinate those in a standardized way, and you need to be able to negotiate those services and deliver them between providers. You need to make it seamless for the enterprise so they don't really know how those services are actually being realized in the ICT environment. They just get the service, they get a high quality, they have access to the service when they need it. So having the standardized APIs is really critical in order to enable that to happen. And this is the kind of work that has its genesis in the MEF and TM Forum. These type of standards are very important, and also more recently on the C-band type environments. Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Jason and Sue, this one's for you. How does the role of orchestration change to enable end-to-end automation, and what do you both feel are the keys to success for orchestration across multiple providers and domains?
Okay, well, I'll start with that, John. So I think, first of all, it's not just about orchestration when we talk about automation. Of course, that's a key part. But it's also, we need to consider and bring in different OSS systems. For example, inventory. If you don't know what's in your network and you can't react in real time to changes in your network, you're never going to be able to automate. Things like configuration management, it needs to be automated not just for virtual resources, but for physical resources once you've initially deployed them, and you want to, optimize over time. So we really need to look at combining orchestration and OSS to deliver, end-to-end automation. But we have to consider OSS is not that legacy stuff. It's got to evolve. It's got to be modernized. It needs to be real time. Certainly needs to be cloud native because we need to start running this software on Kubernetes based different types of cloud platforms, whether it's from a public provider, whether it's from a telco service provider. So that becomes really key, and certainly, supporting the MEF APIs we talked of earlier. And when it comes to service orchestration, that's kind of in the center of the MEF framework. It needs to support northbound, east-west, to really make it easy for that multi-vendor operation. So the next key thing also is that we need a new distribution model. We basically are looking to automate the different service provider domains and make them self-sufficient. So if you think of Open vRAN, or if you think of transport network, or if you think of the core network, you need to be able to bring the different pieces of orchestration and inventory and configuration management, assurance tools, and analytics, all that to, basically make each of these domains very self-sufficient. And then you only need to go out of that domain when you're looking at end-to-end services that cross those domains or cross into different service providers. And maybe that's a good point actually for Jason to talk about the inter-provider piece.
Thanks, Sue. That is a good segue into, our focus and what I wanted to talk about or answer the question is on orchestration inter-provider, the east-west component between service providers. And one of the keys to success we hear from our customers is that simplifying and standardizing how their business support systems talk to each other. And what I mean by that is that service providers who implement solutions that let their customers easily understand what services they can buy and at what cost, where those services are available, and how to order those services are going to have a leg up on their competitors who still rely upon, in many cases, disjointed manual quote to order and fulfillment processes. Today, those inefficient manual ordering processes result in nearly 15% of orders being canceled, and inter-provider ordering life cycles averaging 50 plus days. To that point, we formed a technology partnership with Connected to Fiber to enable that end-to-end service order orchestration across multiple providers, basically combining pre-order steps of serviceability and quoting with the actual ordering workflow into a single automated solution. And we believe that this will greatly simplify the order lifecycle for customers. Now, with the multitude of networking services and service provider options available today, those service providers that provide the best customer experience and most efficient service delivery are going to be the winners. And this is why adoption of standards like LSO Sonata are so important to enabling inter-provider orchestration.
Thank you both. That was great. How about Jason? And let's follow on by Michael on this. What's been the most challenging part, or the weakest link maybe, to delivering inter-provider service automation? Think business, organizational, even technical. And how do you address it?
Yeah, thanks, John. So I think that all three factors, business, organizational, and technical, have really hindered delivery on the promise of inter-provider service orchestration and automation. However, I think the technical challenge is probably the least of the three. The LSO standards being developed by MEF and collaboration with other industry organizations like TM Forum and ONAP are addressing the technical challenge, but perhaps the bigger challenge that needs to be addressed is business and organizational. Traditional telecom service providers still have systems and operations in place that are tied to legacy networks and services, and are really not designed to support emerging networks and services such as 5G or SD-WAN. From a business and organizational standpoint, evolving systems and operations to meet today's demand for high bandwidth, dynamic, on-demand network services requires a commitment to and resources for digital transformation. As service providers transform and deploy these technologies to enable service automation, the challenge of orchestrating services end-to-end that span multiple IP domains and infrastructures remains. So even as cooperating service providers start to implement standard APIs like Sonata, they all have their own strategy and timeline for when they'll support those APIs. And really, no two service providers have strategies and timelines that are aligned, right? And so one way to solve this challenge is to leverage an ecosystem and platform that lets any service provider participate with any other service provider in buying, selling, and fulfilling those inter-provider service orders, regardless of what system interfaces they use for service ordering. So take, for example, a North American service provider that uses an ASOG-compliant ordering system that wants to buy and provision wholesale services from an international service provider that uses MEF-Sonata for ordering.
Yeah, and I'd like to add to what Jason has talked about and just give some additional perspectives. I think one of the major things we see as we deal with the customers who are grappling with whether or not to implement the inter-provider service automation standards are, I suppose, the initial scope for those inter-provider service automation was around a specific service set in the access network or transit network. And I think that depending on where you were in that service chain, your different business case, which I think Jason has also alluded to, that the business case can be very specific to the individual provider and the amount of business they actually have in that area. I also another fundamental thing is that we really need to broaden the use of the idea and the thinking and the vision for inter-provider service automation. I mentioned earlier that there's a major disruption taking place with the introduction of new technologies, new types of services, and I think there really needs to be a top-down vision supported by senior management in the providers who really see it as by introducing inter-provider service automation, it's not just about automating existing services and replacing how you do business with existing services, but really where's the new opportunities here what can I do to deliver a seamless experience to my customers, going forward? How can I really make new revenue opportunities, capture new market share? I think they're the most important things. And then I think, as Jason mentioned, I think making it easy for people to onboard into a interprovider ecosystem is really critical. So giving them the means and the tools to do that. So we have the LSO Sonata SDKs, but now we need the software, the services that allow people to quickly onboard into the interprovider ecosystem.
Thank you, gentlemen. Susan, we're going back over to you for this. Open vRAN is a hot disruptive topic, but how important is automation in this domain, and what additional business value will it really bring?
Okay, well, certainly it is a big hot topic right now. Many companies are involved in working on Open vRAN. And in a nutshell, automation is absolutely critical. And the reason is because we've got, multiple edge locations now, and having to decide, which resources go where. We've got multiple vendors. Of course, that's the whole point of Open vRAN. You're introducing new partners, new vendors, being able to onboard those, upgrade the software for those vendors. It's got to be automated. And also, services need to be on demand. That's the whole point of moving to a more flexible RAN architecture, so that we can, have services that scale faster, but also bring new types of vertical services to market faster. And just playing off what Jason and Michael said related to interprovider, when it comes to Open vRAN, even in this domain, some service providers don't, for example, have the transport network. And so you need to work across different service providers to be able to bring in that transport network quickly. Again, all that has to be automated, or else you'll never keep up. So it's a really big area. Definitely starts with planning and design that needs to be automated, plus how you intelligently place resources. We've been working together with our parent company at NEC and some other partners like Altiostar and Red Hat and Dell, for example, putting together a reference architecture, and really working out the different integration points, the operations pieces. And now we're actually taking that to a new level with MEF proof of concept. We're working with NTT and some additional partners like Juniper and Adva to look at how you can turn that sort of Open vRAN into a true MEC environment, where you're not just dealing with RAN resources anymore, you're dealing with cloud applications, virtual applications, you're dealing with MEC applications, and you're dealing with them across providers. So Microsoft is actually key in this proof of concept as well. So this is something we'll be able to showcase in next month in February. So that's something we'll show the results of. But yeah, certainly without automation, none of this is feasible.
Excellent. So Sue, let's stay with this. The industry talks a lot about the promise of end-to-end network slicing to open up new opportunities, especially in B2B. But how feasible is it really to actually get dynamic slicing up and physically running?
Yeah, well, network slicing we've been talking about for a long time, as we talk about the technology, well before it's ready. And there's a lot of progress happening in slicing, but yes, there's a lot of moving parts. It's complex. Anybody who's working on it knows that it is really complex to do. So you need new technology. Of course, you need 5G core that needs to separate the control and the user plane. We need to bring in new slice management functions at the service layer, but also down in the individual sub-layers. Now, some of these have been standardized. 3GPP is working on particularly the standards there in the core. But when it comes to slicing in the transport network, we still have some gaps there. So maybe that's an area where MEF, for example, could step in. Even in the RAN, there's some things that have been defined. So in Netcracker, we're really working on how that works from an end-to-end basis as well, how you cross over those different slicing domains to make end-to-end slicing work. But I think what's also critical is taking that up a level to the BSS, because, on the operational side, it's one thing to have the dynamic slicing working, but how do you charge for it? What do you charge for? What's the business model? So we've been working very much on, making sure that the BSS systems can charge for all different parts of the slice, attributes of the slice, from whether it's to do with latency or throughput. And if an enterprise wants to actually manage their own slices, how do you charge for that? I mean, again, it's an important business thing. So we're working on the business aspects with the service providers as well as the operational aspects, and I think that's quite key.
Thank you, Susan. Michael, I'm going to jump to you. What would you say that individual providers and the industry as a whole need to do to really make this transition?
Well, I think the individual providers themselves need to look at their own situation, their business. Where are they going to make some revenues? How are they going to improve their efficiencies within their organizations? And how they're going to interact with their customers, with their suppliers and partners in an automated fashion to develop really differentiated services that they can deliver quickly to their customers, give a much higher customer experience. How the industry as a whole can react is really around individual providers realizing that they themselves cannot deliver all of what's needed to support the services of their customers, and to be able to partner in genuine partnerships with their customers, to work in partnership, to implement the standards, to be able to drive the automation between themselves and their partners to deliver those differentiated services to the customers. So I think that's really the major need that we have in the marketplace.
All right, and here to wrap us up, a quick question for each of you. Give me some quick thoughts and tell me, where do you all see us in 3 years on our journey towards the Global Networking Federation supporting on-demand services across multiple provider networks? Let's start with yourself, Jason.
Well, I think that we're going to see much greater automation between service providers that enables those on-demand services. And it's really going to be driven in large part by the adoption of common standards such as the MEF, LSO, APIs, as well as an underlying infrastructure based on 5G and software-defined networking that supports dynamic real-time provisioning of services.
Okay, well, I think what I would be hoping for in a few years is that we're very good in our industry at solving technology issues. And we have many of those right now, but we will get through them. We always do. So automation, operations, even up to the business layer. But I really think we need to have a big focus on the business case and the business model. We have so many new opportunities with 5G. With different verticals. We have tons of use cases. Everybody's showcasing them all the time. They all look wonderful. But will they fly? Who's prepared to pay for what? Are they realistic? And I think if we can get to the business side and excite the finance people, that's where we'll see the real deployments and investments, because we'll solve the technology, but it'll only fly if there's a real business need. And I think that has to be proven. And I think in the next few years, we'll dig a bit deeper and we'll get down to that.
Okay. So I think that the market needs have shifted, as I mentioned earlier. We see the need for on-demand access to services. That's not going to change. That's not going to go backwards. So it really depends on who rises up to the challenge within the next 3 years. We have, and for providers, for traditional providers to participate in that, I think they really need to look at adopting the standards, look at carving out new relationships. There is a huge competition from the hyperscalers. They can cherry pick certain services which they can go after, but they can also do it in partnership with providers. But those providers need to work, and implement standards and meet the kind of on-demand that is the future of the inter-provider and the ICT services. Okay.
That was great. Thank you so much to our panel of experts and joining us here, everyone, for the end-to-end service automation, capitalizing on business disruption opportunities. Once again, a big shout out to Susan White of Netcracker, Michael Kearns of Amartis, and Jason Ettinger of NuoStar. Really appreciate you being here with us
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.